The marble is scorching, and Malik Carter is steps away from the scholarship booth that could save his family from eviction. He has one crumpled dollar in his pocket, bus fare home, and if he misses this chance, it's gone forever. Then the tomb guard sways. Tourists keep filming. No one moves. The sentinel's white glove trembles before he collapses onto stone baking in brutal heat. Security shouts, "Do not cross the line!" Malik's heart pounds. Cross it, and he risks arrest. Stay back, and a soldier lies helpless in the sun. The volunteer is waving. Last call. One choice. Malik vaults the rope and drops to his knees, pressing his last warm soda to the guard's neck. Cameras turn. Gasps rise. What Malik doesn't know is that this moment will bring uniforms to his door by morning. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The pre-dawn darkness wrapped around the Carters' small apartment like a heavy blanket. Malik moved quietly through the dim living room, careful not to wake his mother sleeping on their worn couch. The springs creaked softly as he sat to lace up his scuffed sneakers, the soles nearly worn through from miles of walking. Renee Carter stirred slightly, her work uniform still on from her late-night cleaning shift. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but even in sleep, her face held a gentle strength. Malik pulled their thin blanket up to cover her shoulders, his heart aching at how exhausted she looked. The kitchen clock read 5:15 a.m. Malik moved like a shadow, gathering the grocery bags he'd prepared the night before. The plastic handles were doubled up to prevent breaking. He'd learned that lesson the hard way last month when Mrs. Knox's eggs had splattered all over the stairwell. He paused at their small kitchen counter, running his fingers over the corner where paint was peeling. The drawer below held secrets his mother thought he didn't know about. Past due notices and an eviction warning that made his stomach twist whenever he thought about it. But right now, he had neighbors counting on him. The borrowed bike waited outside, propped against the building's brick wall. Its rusty chain rattled as Malik secured the grocery bags to the handlebars. The cracked pedal caught the dim security light. He'd have to be careful with that one. Up 4 flights of stairs to Ms. Darlene Knox's apartment. His knuckles barely touched her door before it opened. "That you, baby?" Ms. Knox's weathered face broke into a warm smile. "Lord, you're here early." "Morning, Ms. Knox." Malik carefully transferred the bags to her small kitchen table. "Got your eggs on top this time?" "You're an angel, just like your daddy was." She pressed a wrinkled $5 bill into his hand. "For your trouble?" "No, ma'am." Malik gently pushed it back. "Mom says neighbors help neighbors." Back in the hallway, he could hear Jalen Reed already waiting by the stairwell, math book in hand. The 11-year-old's face lit up when he saw Malik. "You came!" Jalen clutched his textbook like a lifeline. "Said I would, didn't I?" Malik settled onto the worn carpet, patting the space next to him. "Show me what's giving you trouble." For the next hour, they worked through fraction problems by the weak hallway light. Malik remembered how his father used to explain math using car parts. It had made everything click for him back then. "See? You divide both top and bottom numbers just like splitting an engine block," Malik demonstrated, watching understanding dawn in Jalen's eyes. "You're way better at explaining than Ms. Wilson," Jalen said, scribbling down another answer. Malik didn't mention that Jalen's grandmother had tried to pay him last week. He'd seen her counting pennies for bread. He couldn't take money from people who had even less than his family did. Back in their apartment, Malik's stomach growled as he quietly gathered his things. A single banana sat in their fruit bowl. He knew his mother had left it for him. The thought made his throat tight. He reached into his pocket, fingers brushing the familiar raised letters of his father's dog tags. The metal was warm against his skin, like it held some echo of his dad's strength. Standing tall, he thought, just like Pop always said. The Arlington National Cemetery flyer was creased from being read so many times. Free admission today, with special STEM program demonstrations. His heart lifted at the thought. Engineering had been his dream, ever since he'd started fixing neighbors' appliances with his dad's old tools. The kitchen sink dripped steadily. Their super never fixed it properly. Malik filled up Mrs. Peterson's water jug from next door. Her tap had been running brown lately, and she was too proud to complain to management. He heard his mother stirring and quickly set out her favorite mug for coffee. The cabinet's meager contents couldn't hide the truth. She'd been skipping meals again so he could eat. The thought sat like a stone in his stomach. "Baby, you're up early." Renee's voice was thick with exhaustion as she emerged from the living room. Her work shirt was wrinkled from sleeping in it. "Just helping Ms. Knox with her groceries," Malik said, pushing the banana toward her. "You should eat something, Mom." "That's for you." She kissed his forehead, her smile tired but genuine. "You've got a long walk ahead." The bus fare in his pocket felt heavy. $3.50, that could help with bills instead. The weather report had warned about dangerous heat today, but he'd walked further in worse conditions. "I thought I'd save the fare," he said carefully, watching his mother's face. "It's not so far." "Malik," she started to protest, then stopped, understanding in her eyes. "Just promise you'll drink plenty of water." The morning sun was already fierce as Malik stepped outside, the air thick and heavy with coming heat. He adjusted his backpack, making sure the water bottle was full. His father's dog tags pressed against his chest, a quiet reminder of purpose. The Arlington flyer crinkled in his pocket as he started walking. Free admission meant a chance, a small one, but still a chance at something better. Engineering demonstrations, scholarship information. Maybe even a way to help his mom stop working so hard. The heat pressed down, but Malik stood tall, his father's words echoing in his mind. One foot in front of the other, just like every other day. He had promises to keep and dreams to chase, even if the path there meant walking miles in the scorching sun. The late morning sun beat down mercilessly as Malik made his way through the streets of D.C. Heat shimmered off the pavement like waves, distorting the buildings ahead. His T-shirt already clung to his back, and he'd only covered half the distance to Arlington. Every few blocks, he stopped in patches of shade, taking careful sips from his water bottle. His father's voice echoed in his memory. "Smart soldiers ration their supplies, son." The thought made him smile, despite the sweat trickling down his face. Up ahead, a group of people clustered around a stalled car, their voices carrying on the thick air. An elderly man sat behind the wheel, looking frustrated as two others tried unsuccessfully to push the vehicle toward the curb. Malik hesitated for just a moment before jogging over. "Need help?" he called out, already moving to the back bumper. A woman in business attire gave him a grateful look. "That would be wonderful." On three? Together, they threw their weight against the car. Malik's sneakers scraped against the asphalt as they inched the vehicle forward. The muscles in his arms burned, but he kept pushing until they finally reached the curb. "Thank you, young man," the elderly driver said, wiping his brow. "That's real kindness in this heat." Malik nodded, catching his breath. "My dad was a mechanic." "Might be your starter. It makes that same clicking sound when it's going bad." He continued his journey, his shirt now completely soaked. The library's familiar brick building up ahead beckoned like an oasis. Inside, the blast of air conditioning hit him like a wave of relief. Finding a quiet corner, Malik sank into a chair, letting his body temperature normalize. His fingers traced the dog tags through his shirt, a habit that always steadied him. The engineering camp costs $12,000 for 6 weeks. A man's voice carried from nearby shelves, "But it's worth every penny." Timothy's project won first place. Malik's hands tightened on his backpack straps. He'd seen those camps advertised, prestigious programs where kids built robots and learned computer design. The kind of opportunity that might as well be on the moon for someone like him. He pulled out his father's old notebook, filled with mechanical drawings and repair notes. The margins were crowded with Malik's own sketches, improvements for Mrs. Peterson's ancient window unit, ideas for fixing the building's temperamental elevator, dreams scratched out in pencil, because that's all he could afford. Checking his watch, Malik gathered his things. The crumpled dollar in his pocket, his emergency bus fare home, felt like it was burning a hole. That same dollar could help with the utility bill his mother thought she'd hidden so well. At the metro station entrance, he paused. Commuters rushed past, swiping their cards without a second thought. Malik squared his shoulders and turned away. He could walk. They needed that dollar more. The afternoon sun was relentless as he finally approached Arlington's gates. The cemetery stretched before him, rows of white headstones standing at perfect attention against the green hills. The sight caught in his throat. All these soldiers, like his father, who'd given everything. Marines in dress uniforms stood at strategic points, watching the crowds with alert eyes. Near the entrance, a medical station had been set up, with bottles of water and packets of electrolytes laid out. A medic was already treating someone for heat exhaustion. Malik pulled out his phone, its case held together with duct tape. His fingers hovered over the keys before typing, "I'm safe. I'm learning." The response came quickly. "Come home before dark." He could almost hear his mother's worried tone. Following the stream of visitors, Malik made his way toward the tomb of the unknown soldier. Each step felt heavy with meaning. This was sacred ground. He remembered his father explaining that during their only visit years ago. The crowd near the tomb was respectfully quiet, despite the oppressive heat. Malik found a spot where he could see clearly, his eyes drawn to the precision of the guard's movements. Every step, every turn, executed with perfect discipline. The rifle movements were like a dance, but one that spoke of deep honor rather than celebration. The guard's shoes gleamed despite the heat, each step falling exactly 21 paces apart. Malik watched, transfixed by the ceremony that had remained unchanged for generations. The dedication it took to maintain that level of precision, especially in this weather, was staggering. Sweat trickled down his back, but Malik barely noticed. His father had brought him here once, when he was very young. "This is what dedication looks like," Marcus Carter had said, his voice soft with respect. "This is what it means to stand for something bigger than yourself." Now, watching the guard's unwavering commitment, Malik understood more deeply what his father had meant. The heat didn't matter. The discomfort didn't matter. What mattered was the promise to keep going, to honor what was important, no matter what it cost. The crowd shifted slightly as more people arrived, but Malik held his ground. His feet ached from the long walk, his shirt was damp with sweat, but none of that seemed important now. Here, watching this ceremony, he felt connected to something larger than his daily struggles, connected to his father's memory, to a tradition of service that stretched back generations. The guard moved with mechanical precision, weapon at shoulder arms, each movement crisp despite the heat waves visibly rising from the stone plaza. Malik stood perfectly still, absorbing every detail, understanding that he was witnessing something both timeless and precious. The changing of the guard drew everyone's attention. Staff Sergeant Evan Price emerged from the guard quarters, his uniform perfect despite the brutal afternoon heat. His shoes gleamed like mirrors, every brass button caught the sunlight, and his white gloves seemed to glow against the dark rifle. The crowd fell silent, phones lowered out of respect. Even the smallest children seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. Malik's hand found his father's dog tags, warm from being pressed against his chest all morning. 21 steps. Turn. 21 steps back. Each movement was precise, rehearsed thousands of times until it became something beyond mere routine. Malik counted under his breath, just as he had when his father first taught him about this sacred ritual. The Sentinel's badge is the second rarest award in the military, his father had explained. These guards train for months just to earn the right to stand watch. The heat index display on a nearby medical station flashed. 100 Turu Digsephers. Malik wiped sweat from his eyes, wondering how the guard managed in that thick wool uniform. He noticed something then, the slightest tremor in Sergeant Price's white-gloved hand as he executed the rifle movement. Most people wouldn't catch it, but Malik had spent years watching his father work on engines, learning to spot the smallest details that might signal trouble. A voice cut through his concentration. "Last call for the STEM scholarship orientation. Limited spaces available." Malik's heart jumped. The whole reason he'd made this journey, the chance at a future his mother desperately wanted for him. The booth was just across the plaza, maybe 50 yards away. He should go. Now. But he couldn't take his eyes off Sergeant Price. Another tremor, more pronounced this time. The guard's next turn wasn't quite as crisp. Malik recognized the signs of heat stress from his first aid training at school. Training he'd taken because his mother couldn't afford a doctor if he got hurt. 21 steps, Malik whispered, watching intently. 20. Price faltered slightly. 9. The guard's next turn was unsteady. A murmur went through the crowd. Malik saw Price's chest heaving slightly beneath his uniform, a uniform designed for ceremony, not for 100-degree heat. The scholarship booth coordinator's voice carried across the plaza again. "Final 5 minutes for registration." Malik's feet shifted, torn between two duties. His mother's voice echoed in his head. "Education is your way forward, baby." But his father's voice was there too. "We take care of our own." Before he could decide, the choice was made for him. Sergeant Price swayed once, then crumpled to the stone plaza. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Security personnel rushed forward, shouting about protocols and civilian restrictions. Tourists backed away, phones raised to record the scene. The scholarship coordinator's voice faded as people hurried toward the commotion. Malik didn't think. He moved. The rope barrier caught at his waist as he vaulted over it, but he barely felt it. His worn sneakers hit the sun-baked stone, and even through the rubber soles, he could feel the heat. When his knees touched the plaza to reach the fallen guard, it was like kneeling on hot coals. "Sir? Can you hear me?" Malik's voice was steady, just like when he helped Mrs. Peterson during her dizzy spells. He could hear people shouting at him to move back, but the words seemed distant. The guard's face was flushed deep red, his breathing shallow. Malik yanked off his own t-shirt, ignoring the sun burning his bare shoulders, and held it up to shade Price's face. With his other hand, he pulled out his half-melted soda, the one luxury he'd allowed himself for the long walk home. Security was getting closer. "Step away from the sentinel immediately." Instead, Malik unscrewed the soda cap with his teeth, pulled his handkerchief from his back pocket, and poured the cool liquid onto the cloth. He pressed it gently to Price's neck, right where his father had shown him the pulse points were. "Need a medic here," Malik's voice carried across the plaza, stronger than he'd ever heard it. "He's got heat exhaustion, maybe worse." The guard's eyes fluttered. His lips moved, trying to speak, but Malik shook his head. "Stay still, sir. Help's coming. Just focus on breathing." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Malik kept the shirt steady, shielding Price's face while maintaining pressure with the cool cloth. His knees were burning on the hot stone, but he didn't move. His father had taught him that sometimes pain was the price of doing what's right. A shadow fell over them both. Malik glanced up to see a Marine officer looming over him, face stern beneath his cover. A hand gripped Malik's shoulder, ready to pull him away, then stopped. The officer's eyes had locked onto something. Malik followed his gaze to where his father's dog tags had fallen forward, dangling in the space between them. The metal caught the sunlight, making the engraved name clear. Carter, Marcus A. The officer's grip on Malik's shoulder changed, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he knelt down beside them, his voice carrying command without anger. "Tell me about these dog tags, son." Malik kept his makeshift shade steady, even as his arm trembled from the strain. His voice came out clear and respectful, just as his father had taught him. "They belonged to my father, sir. He was a mechanic with the 3rd Battalion. He always said, 'We look after our own.'" The wail of the approaching ambulance grew louder. More Marines had appeared, forming a protective circle around them. The crowd pressed against the barriers, phones raised, whispering and pointing. But Malik's focus remained on the fallen guard, keeping that shirt raised against the merciless sun, the cool cloth pressed to overheated skin. His chance at the scholarship was surely gone now. His mother would be disappointed, maybe even angry. But as he knelt there on the burning stone, his father's dog tags catching the light, Malik knew with absolute certainty that he'd made the choice his father would have wanted. The medics swarmed around Sergeant Price, their movements swift and practiced. Malik stayed where he was, his knees screaming from the hot stone, until someone gently touched his shoulder. He looked up to find a female Marine officer kneeling beside him, her insignia marking her as a major. "I'm Major Torres," she said, her voice calm but authoritative. "Can you tell me what happened?" Malik's throat felt dry. He watched as the medics worked on Sergeant Price, attaching monitors and starting an IV. "I saw him getting unsteady during his walk. Then he collapsed. I had to help." Major Torres studied him carefully, her eyes moving from his bare shoulders to his discarded shirt, still damp from being used as shade. "You crossed a restricted area to help a tomb guard. That's a serious breach of protocol." Malik's heart pounded. He'd known there would be consequences, but hearing it stated so officially made his stomach clench. "Yes, ma'am. I understand." Instead of continuing with what Malik assumed would be his punishment, Major Torres asked softly, "What's your father's name?" The question caught him off guard. Malik's hand automatically went to the dog tags still hanging outside his undershirt. "Marcus Carter, ma'am. He was an Army mechanic." Something shifted in Major Torres's expression. She reached for the dog tags, handling them with unexpected reverence. "Marcus Carter," she repeated, her voice carrying a note of recognition. "3rd Battalion?" "Yes, ma'am. I remember him." Major Torres's professional demeanor softened slightly. "He kept our convoy running during a sandstorm outside Kandahar. Worked for 36 hours straight to get 5 vehicles back in service." Malik felt his chest tighten. People rarely spoke about his father's service. He never talked much about it. The quiet ones rarely do. Major Torres gestured to 2 Marines nearby. "Let's get you somewhere cooler. We need to talk about what happened here." They helped Malik to his feet. His knees buckled slightly. The skin was angry red from the hot stone, and blisters were already forming. Behind the barrier, a woman with a press badge filmed everything, her camera steady and professional. The name on her credential read, Tasha Wynn. As they led him to a shaded area, Malik caught glimpses of her footage playing back on her camera's screen. Himself vaulting the barrier, taking off his shoes before kneeling on the blazing stone, using his shirt as a sun shield. The images looked surreal, like they'd happened to someone else. Major Torres sat across from him in the shade, her posture straight, but not unkind. "What you did today broke several protocols. The tomb of the unknown soldier is one of our most sacred sites, and the rules exist for a reason." Malik nodded, bracing himself. "However," she continued, "intent matters. You didn't cross that line for attention or disruption. You saw someone in trouble and acted to help, at considerable cost to yourself." She glanced at his blistered knees. "That says something about your character." A medic approached with an ice pack and some gauze, but Major Torres waved them away. "Get him properly treated in a moment. First," she pulled out a small notebook, "I need your contact information. Full name, address, phone number." Malik's hands shook slightly as he recited the details. Each piece of information felt like another weight being added to whatever punishment awaited him. "Go home and get those knees treated properly," Major Torres said when she finished writing. "You'll be hearing from us." "Yes, ma'am." Malik stood carefully, wincing at the pain. Is Sergeant Price going to be okay?" "The medics say he'll recover fully." She gave him a considering look. "You should be proud of what you did today, even if it wasn't by the book." Malik gathered his few belongings, his phone, his father's tags, his worn shoes. The scholarship booth caught his eye across the plaza. People were already packing up the displays and folding the tables. His heart sank as he watched his chance at a better future disappear. The bus ride home was long and uncomfortable. His knees throbbed with every bump and turn. He'd used his last dollar for the fare, and his phone battery was nearly dead. The air conditioning on the bus barely worked, leaving everyone sweaty and irritable. When he finally made it back to the apartment, Renee was waiting. She took one look at his blistered knees and bare chest and pulled him inside. "What happened to you?" Her voice carried equal parts concern and fear, the fear of a single mother who couldn't afford hospital bills. "I had to help someone," Malik said quietly as she led him to their worn couch. "At Arlington." Renee disappeared into their tiny bathroom and returned with their dwindling first aid supplies. "Tell me everything," she said, carefully cleaning his raw knees with their last antiseptic wipes. Malik had just started explaining when his phone buzzed, then buzzed again, and again. Notifications began pouring in. Messages, tags, shares. His screen lit up with activity faster than he could process. Renee's hands stilled on his knee. "Malik, what's happening?" Before he could answer, another wave of notifications flooded his phone, and the screen went black as the battery finally died. Malik sat beside his mother on their worn couch, the springs creaking beneath them. The glow from Renee's phone cast blue shadows across their faces as they watched the video for what felt like the 100th time. Tasha Wynn's footage was steady and clear, capturing the exact moment Malik had vaulted over the rope barrier to help the fallen guard. "Look at the comments coming in," Renee whispered, her finger trembling as she scrolled. The notifications kept piling up faster than they could read them. "Hero kid at Arlington," one comment read. "Who raised this young man?" "Respect," said another. But then, "Complete disrespect for protocol. Should be charged." He could have made things worse. Guards train for emergencies. Malik's stomach twisted. He hadn't thought about protocol or consequences in that moment. He'd just seen someone who needed help. Now, watching himself on the tiny screen, doubt crept in. What if he'd actually endangered the guard further? What if his interference had made everything worse? "Baby, what if they come for you?" Renee's voice was tight with worry. She'd already lost her husband to service-related illness. The thought of losing her son to legal trouble made her hands shake. "Maybe we should call someone? A lawyer?" "We can't afford a lawyer, Mom." Malik's voice was quiet, but steady. He touched the dog tags still hanging around his neck. "Besides, Major Torres didn't arrest me there." She knew Dad's name. Their ancient box fan rattled in the window, pushing around hot air that offered little relief. The temperature in their apartment had to be over 90 degrees, even this late at night. Sweat beaded on their foreheads as they continued watching reactions pour in. Local news stations were picking up the story. Malik's phone had died hours ago, but Renee's kept buzzing with alerts. Someone had tracked down his social media profiles. Friend requests and messages flooded in from strangers. "Look at this one." Renee pointed to a longer comment. "My brother serves at Arlington. Protocol exists for a reason. This kid's 15 minutes of fame could cost a guard his career." That one hit Malik hard. He hadn't considered that the guard, Sergeant Price, might face consequences for needing help. The thought made his already sore knees ache worse. The box fan gave one final wheeze around midnight and died completely, leaving them in stifling silence. Neither could sleep. They sat in the dark, watching the video spread further and further online, the comments becoming more heated on both sides. "Your father would be proud," Renee said softly, sometime around 3 in the morning. "He always said doing the right thing isn't about following rules. It's about following your heart." Malik nodded, though his heart felt heavy. He'd missed his chance at the scholarship booth because he'd stopped to help. Now he might be in serious trouble, too. But even knowing all that, he couldn't imagine walking past someone who needed help, no matter what uniform they wore. The first hint of dawn was creeping through their blinds when they heard it. a low rumble that seemed to shake the whole building. At first, Malik thought it was construction equipment. Their neighborhood was slowly being developed, which usually meant longtime residents would soon be priced out. But this rumble was different. It was steady, coordinated, and it was accompanied by something else, the rhythmic sound of many feet moving in perfect unison. Malik went to the window and carefully parted the blinds. His breath caught in his throat. The entire courtyard of their apartment complex was filled with Marines, 100 of them, standing in perfect formation, their uniforms crisp despite the early morning heat. Neighbors were emerging onto their balconies and stairwells, phones raised to capture the extraordinary sight. "Mom!" Malik's voice cracked. "Mom, you need to see this." Renee joined him at the window. Her hand found his shoulder and gripped tight. "Oh, Lord," she whispered. Through the gathering crowd, Major Sofia Torres strode forward. Beside her was a man Malik didn't recognize, his insignia marking him as a captain. They moved with purpose toward Malik's building. "They're coming to arrest me," Malik said, his voice small. "No." Renee straightened her shoulders, though her hand trembled on Malik's arm. "We face whatever comes together." A knock at their door made them both jump. When they opened it, Major Torres and Captain Harlow stood in their narrow hallway, their presence making the space seem even smaller. "Mrs. Carter," Major Torres addressed Renee with quiet respect. "We apologize for the early hour. I'm Major Sofia Torres, and this is Captain Jonah Harlow. May we come in?" Renee nodded, stepping back to let them enter. Their small apartment seemed to shrink further with the two officers inside. "We're not here to cause trouble," Major Torres said, noting their obvious anxiety. "We're here because your son's actions yesterday reached someone very important, and because the name Marcus Carter still carries weight with people who remember true service and honor." Through their window, Malik could see Marines unloading something massive from a flatbed truck. Whatever it was completely covered by a heavy tarp, secured tightly against the morning breeze. Major Torres met his eyes directly. "This is only the beginning," she said. Outside, the sun climbed higher in the sky. The tarp snapped in the growing heat as Malik stood frozen, surrounded by stunned neighbors watching from every vantage point, and 100 United States Marines standing at perfect attention in his courtyard. The morning sun beat down on the gathered crowd as Major Torres raised her hand. At her signal, 4 Marines moved in perfect coordination to the covered cargo. Their hands found the edges of the heavy tarp, waiting for the final command. "Mrs. Carter, Malik," Major Torres said, turning to face them. "Yesterday's act of courage revealed something rare, the kind of character that can't be taught. Today, we're here to honor that character with more than just words." She nodded to the Marines. In one fluid motion, they pulled the tarp away. Renee's hand flew to her mouth. Malik stood absolutely still, trying to process what he was seeing. It was a pristine white work van, but that simple description didn't do it justice. The side panel bore fresh lettering in bold blue, "Carter Mobile Lab." The back doors stood open, revealing a compact but beautifully organized mobile workshop. Tools hung in perfect order along the walls, wrenches, drivers, diagnostic equipment, all neatly arranged. A small workbench was bolted to one side, with a laptop station mounted above it. Solar panels on the roof connected to a battery system tucked beneath the bench. "Everything is industrial grade," Captain Harlow explained, stepping forward. "The safety equipment meets all OSHA standards. The computers loaded with engineering and design software. There's even a 3D printer secured in that cabinet." Malik moved closer, drawn to the van like it was magnetic. His fingers brushed the fresh paint, tracing the letters of his family name. Behind him, he heard his mother's breath catch in a sob. "This isn't charity," Major Torres said quietly to Renee. "This is investment in purpose. Your son showed us who he is. Now we're showing him what he can become." Captain Harlow produced a leather folder. "There's more," he said, opening it to reveal official documents. "A full scholarship to the Arlington STEM Academy's engineering program, plus 6 months of housing assistance through the Veterans Educational Support Foundation. Renee's hands shook as she took the papers. "This is too much," she whispered. "We can't possibly." "You can," a new voice said. "And you must." A distinguished-looking man in a suit approached from the crowd. His bearing marked him as military, though he wore civilian clothes. "Gideon Price," he introduced himself, extending his hand first to Renee, then to Malik. "I'm the director of the Veterans Educational Support Foundation, and the father of Staff Sergeant Evan Price, the tomb guard your son helped yesterday." Malik's heart jumped. Is your son okay?" Gideon's expression softened. "Thanks to you? Yes." The heat index was over 100 degrees. Without immediate intervention, heat stroke could have caused permanent damage. Your quick action made the difference. "I broke protocol," Malik said quietly. "I saw the comments online." "Protocol exists to protect our traditions," Gideon agreed. "But the highest tradition of military service is protecting life. You honored that tradition perfectly." He paused, then added, "There's something else you should know. Your father, Marcus Carter, he applied to our foundation's technical education program before he passed." Renee's eyes widened. "What?" "The application was never completed," Gideon explained. "It remained in our system as a pending file. Just a name, until yesterday. When Major Torres recognized it, everything connected. Your father's service record, his technical expertise, his dream of education for his family, and now his son, showing the same character in a moment of crisis." Malik felt dizzy. The morning heat pressed in around him, but he barely noticed. His eyes kept moving between the van, the scholarship papers, and his mother's tear-streaked face. "The foundation board met by video conference last night," Gideon continued. "This isn't just about one scholarship or one van. We're establishing a permanent program, technical education and mobile workshops for underserved communities. You'll be our pilot student." Malik's throat felt tight. It was too much to take in. The van alone would have been beyond his wildest dreams. But this, a full scholarship, housing security for his mom, a whole program growing from his single moment of action, it felt dangerous to even hope it was real. "Can I?" He gestured toward the van's interior. "It's yours," Major Torres smiled. "Go ahead." Malik stepped up into the mobile workshop. The rubber floor mat was thick and new. Everything smelled of fresh paint and clean metal. His fingers trailed over the tools, each one chosen with purpose, arranged for efficiency. The laptop hummed quietly, its screen displaying a professional CAD program he'd only read about online. A plain manila folder sat on the workbench, marked "Pending Review" in red letters. Malik's hand hesitated over it, suddenly uncertain. After years of watching his mother's hopes crushed by official paperwork, even simple folders had the power to inspire fear. The morning sun streamed through the van's windows, highlighting the perfect organization of his new workspace. Outside, he could hear his neighbors talking in excited whispers, could feel the steady presence of the Marines still standing at attention. His mother's voice carried clearly as she asked Captain Harlow questions about the scholarship details, her tone shifting from disbelief to cautious hope. Malik's fingers brushed the folder's edge, but he didn't open it yet. For just this moment, he wanted to stand in this space that belonged to him, that carried his family's name, that represented everything his father had dreamed of passing on. The afternoon light filtered through the kitchen window, casting long shadows across the stack of papers spread on their worn table. Malik and Renee sat side by side, working through form after form while curious faces peeked in from the hallway. The excitement of the morning's Marine formation had drawn half the building to their door. Ms. Whitaker, a trim woman in a pressed navy suit, tapped her pen against each signature line. "Initial here, date here," she instructed, her voice precise and professional. "The Foundation maintains strict verification protocols. We'll need your school records, government ID, and consent for a routine background check." Malik glanced at his mother, who was studying each page with intense focus. Years of dealing with government paperwork had taught them both to read everything carefully. "It's standard procedure," Ms. Whitaker assured them, adjusting her wire-rimmed glasses. "The Foundation's reputation depends on proper documentation." "We understand," Renee said quietly, signing another form with careful strokes. "We want to do everything right." A soft knock at the door made them look up. Ms. Darlene Knox stood in the doorway, her weathered face bright with excitement. "Sorry to interrupt, but everyone's talking about the commotion this morning. Those Marines standing so straight and proper in our courtyard." Malik smiled, remembering how he'd delivered groceries to her just yesterday morning. It felt like a lifetime ago. "Come in, Ms. Darlene. We've got some cold water bottles from the Foundation. Would you like one?" "Bless you, child." Ms. Darlene eased herself into an empty chair, while Malik retrieved a bottle from the small cooler the Marines had left. "Always thinking of others, just like your daddy was." Behind her appeared Jalen Reed, the boy Malik tutored in math, hovering uncertainly in the doorway. Malik grabbed another water bottle. "Hey, buddy, come check this out." He pulled out his phone to show Jalen pictures of the mobile lab's interior. Jalen's eyes went wide. "That's yours? For real?" "For real," Malik confirmed. "And once I get everything set up, maybe you can help me organize some of the tools. Put those math skills to work with measurements and inventory." Ms. Whitaker cleared her throat gently. "Speaking of getting set up, I have one more piece of news. Dr. Lila Grant has volunteered to be your technical mentor. She's a retired engineer with extensive experience in prototype development." As if on cue, Malik's phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Mrs." Whitaker nodded. "That's probably her now." Malik stepped into the hallway to take the call. "Hello? Malik Carter?" The voice was warm and direct. "This is Dr. Grant. I saw the footage of what you did at Arlington yesterday, and I've reviewed your school records. I'd like to meet tomorrow morning to start working with the mobile lab equipment. Are you available at 8? Malik's heart jumped. "Yes, ma'am. Definitely." "Excellent. Bring a notebook and that sharp mind of yours. We'll start with safety protocols and basic diagnostics. Don't worry about tools. You've got everything you need in that van." After ending the call, Malik returned to find Ms. Whitaker packing up her files. "Everything appears to be in order," she said. "We'll begin processing the verification steps immediately. In the meantime, here are your temporary ID cards and the van's registration papers." When Ms. Whitaker left, followed by Ms. Darlene and Jalen, Malik and Renee sat in silence for a moment. The reality of the day's events seemed to fill their small kitchen. "I'm going to clean up the van," Malik said finally. "Maybe organize the tools before tomorrow." Renee nodded, but her eyes drifted to the kitchen drawer where she kept the eviction notices. "Baby, this is wonderful, miraculous even. But we still need to be careful. The housing authority, they don't always process things quickly, even with Foundation support." "I know, Mom." Malik squeezed her shoulder. "We'll figure it out. One step at a time." He spent the next few hours in the van, wiping down surfaces and familiarizing himself with each piece of equipment. The organization system was military precise, with each tool having its designated place. As he worked, his mind wandered to possible projects, devices that could monitor heat stress, cooling systems for protective gear, safety improvements for people who had to work in dangerous temperatures. The summer evening stretched on, the heat finally breaking as the sun set. Malik's neighbors stopped by periodically, offering congratulations and small gifts, a new notebook from Mr. Johnson who taught at the community center, a pack of pens from Mrs. Rivera, whose car he'd helped jumpstart last month. When the sky turned purple with dusk, Malik reluctantly locked up the van and headed inside. The apartment was cooler now, and Renee had made sandwiches for dinner. They ate together, sharing small smiles between bites, both still processing the day's transformation. Later, lying in bed, Malik held his father's dog tags, running his thumb over the embossed letters. The metal was warm from his grip, and he imagined he could feel his dad's presence stronger than ever. The tags had witnessed his lowest moments: the funeral, the first eviction notice, countless nights of worry, and now they were here for this turning point. Reaching for his phone, Malik set the alarm for 6 a.m. It would be his first real school day in what felt like forever. Fear and hope twisted in his stomach, but he focused on the solid weight of the dog tags in his palm. Whatever came next, he would face it with the same quiet strength that had guided him so far. The morning air was already thick with heat as Malik approached the van parked near the community center. Dr. Lila Grant stood waiting, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing practical khakis and a crisp blue work shirt with rolled-up sleeves. "Right on time," she said, checking her watch. "That's a good start." Her smile was warm but professional as she extended her hand. "Let's get to work." Inside the van, Dr. Grant didn't waste time with small talk. She pulled out a fresh notebook and handed it to Malik. "First rule of engineering: document everything. Ideas, failures, successes, they all teach us something." Malik opened the notebook, its blank pages full of possibility. Dr. Grant watched him carefully unpack his borrowed pencils. "I saw what you did at Arlington," she said matter-of-factly. "Quick thinking, using that soda to cool him down. Tell me, what would you build to prevent that from happening again?" Malik blinked, surprised by the direct question. "Well," he started slowly, "maybe something that could monitor body temperature and hydration levels, small enough to fit under their uniform." "Good instinct." Dr. Grant pulled out some circuit diagrams. "Let's explore that. But first, safety protocols. You can't build anything if you electrocute yourself." For the next 2 hours, they worked through basic electrical safety, tool handling, and proper documentation procedures. Dr. Grant didn't simplify her explanations or talk down to him. Instead, she challenged him, asked questions, and nodded approvingly at his answers. "You have your father's mechanical intuition," she observed, as Malik sketched a rough circuit design. "But you also have something else, an eye for human needs. That's rare in engineers." Before Malik could respond, movement outside the van caught their attention. A small crowd had gathered, including a news van. Tasha Wynn, the journalist who'd filmed his actions at Arlington, stood talking with Major Torres. Dr. Grant squeezed his shoulder. "They're going to want to talk to you. Remember, you're not just a story. You're a builder now." Tasha approached the van, her camera operator hanging back respectfully. "Malik, could we get a few minutes? People want to know more about you, about your father's service, about this amazing opportunity." Malik glanced at Dr. Grant, who nodded encouragingly. Okay," he agreed, "if it helps the foundation." "And your mother," Tasha added kindly. "The more support we can gather, the better." The interview wasn't as scary as Malik expected. Tasha asked thoughtful questions about his interest in engineering and his father's influence. She filmed him working with Dr. Grant, focusing on their project ideas rather than just the viral moment at Arlington. After the interview, Major Torres approached with a garment bag and a shoebox. "The foundation provides appropriate attire for official events," she explained. "Let's make sure these fit." In the community center's bathroom, Malik tried on the new shoes first, proper leather dress shoes that didn't pinch or gap. The suit was simple but well-made, dark blue with a crisp white shirt. Looking in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. When he emerged, Renee was there. She must have gotten Torres's message. She covered her mouth at the sight of him, tears welling up in her eyes. "Mom, don't cry," Malik said, but his own voice was thick with emotion. "My handsome boy," she whispered, straightening his collar. "Your daddy would be so proud." "Doctor." Grant cleared her throat. "Mrs. Carter, would you like to see what your son's been working on? He's got quite a promising design started." As they showed Renee the sketches and explained the heat monitor concept, Malik's phone buzzed. The caller ID read Gideon Price Foundation. "Hello? Malik answered, stepping aside. Malik, this is Gideon Price. The voice was warm, but formal. I'm calling about a ceremony we're planning at Arlington. We'd like to honor both you and your father's memory properly. Would you be willing to say a few words? Malik's heart raced. Yes, sir. I'd be honored. Excellent. We'll send the details shortly. And Malik, my son Evan asked me to tell you personally. Thank you. The call ended, and Malik stood still for a moment, processing. When he shared the news, Renee hugged him tight, and Dr. Grant smiled proudly. They worked until late afternoon, breaking only for the sandwiches Torres brought them. As they packed up, Dr. Grant handed Malik a small tablet. For research and design work. It's loaded with basic CAD software. Study the tutorials tonight. On the bus ride home, Malik scrolled through news coverage on his phone. Most stories were positive, but some comments made his stomach clench. A popular conservative commentator had posted, "Protocol exists for a reason. This boy endangered a national symbol with his reckless behavior." The apartment was filled with the smell of rice and beans when they arrived home, Renee's celebration dinner. While she cooked, Malik sat at their small table, practicing his speech in a low voice. To honor isn't just about following rules, he whispered, testing the words. Sometimes it's about following your heart. Renee stirred the beans, humming softly, a sound Malik hadn't heard in months. The evening light caught the metal of his father's dog tags, now hanging proudly around his neck rather than hidden in his pocket. His tablet chimed with a message from Dr. Grant. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. sharp. Bring your ideas. The future felt solid now, like something he could actually hold on to. For the first time in years, both mother and son allowed themselves to believe that tomorrow might indeed be brighter than today. Malik's phone buzzed at 6:45 a.m., pulling him from sleep. A voicemail notification blinked on the screen. Ms. Whitaker, from the Foundation. His stomach tightened as he pressed play. This is urgent, Malik. Call me immediately when you receive this message. Her usually measured voice held an edge of tension. Malik glanced at his mom's closed bedroom door. Renee had worked a late shift at the diner. He didn't want to wake her. Stepping into their tiny kitchen, he dialed Ms. Whitaker's number with trembling fingers. She answered on the first ring. Malik, thank you for calling back so quickly. A pause. I'm afraid I have some difficult news. The words came like hammer blows. Scholarship frozen. Protocol review. Public complaints. Internal inquiry. But I start classes next week, Malik managed, his voice barely a whisper. I understand this is upsetting, Ms. Whitaker said, her tone professional but not unkind. The Foundation must follow proper procedures when concerns are raised. Several prominent individuals have questioned the appropriateness of rewarding actions that violated sacred protocol. Malik sank into a kitchen chair. How long will the review take? Typically 4 to 6 weeks. However, given the high-profile nature of this case, she trailed off. We'll expedite where possible. After hanging up, Malik stared at the kitchen wall, at the calendar where he'd circled next Monday, his supposed first day of real engineering classes. The morning sun filtered through their thin curtains, already promising another scorcher. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was Major Torres. Van registration hitting unexpected snags. Mobile lab events temporarily on hold. Before he could process this new blow, Renee's door opened. She emerged in her diner uniform, dark circles under her eyes, clutching an official-looking envelope. This came yesterday, she said quietly, sliding the housing authority notice across the table. The rent assistance. It doesn't automatically stop the eviction process. There was a form we never got. Something about verification of income changes. Malik read the notice twice, his vision blurring. Court date set for next week. All their hopes from the past few days seemed to crumble like sand. I'm sorry, Mom, he whispered. Maybe if I hadn't jumped that rope. Don't you dare, Renee cut him off, fierce despite her exhaustion. You did what was right. The system, it's just doing what it always does to people like us. Malik nodded, but shame crept in anyway, cold and heavy in his chest. He'd let himself believe in miracles, in doors swinging wide open. Now, reality was pushing back, hard. After Renee left for work, Malik climbed the stairs to Ms. Darlene's apartment. She answered his knock with one look at his face and pulled him inside. "Sit," she ordered, pouring him a glass of water. "Tell me." He spilled it all out. The frozen scholarship, the van problems, the eviction threat. Ms. Darlene listened, her weathered hands folded in her lap. "Let me tell you something about systems," she said finally. "They don't move for people like us unless somebody pushes. And pushing ain't pretty. It ain't comfortable. But sometimes it's all we got." "How do I push?" Malik asked. "Same way you help that guard, with your heart first, but your head too. Get organized, get loud, but do it smart." Malik pulled out his phone and texted Tasha Wynn. "Need help correcting some misinformation. Can we talk?" Her response came quickly. "My office, 2 p.m. Next, he called Dr. Grant. "I need advice about documentation," he said when she answered. "Everything's falling apart." "Meet me at the library in an hour," she replied. "Bring every piece of paper you have." The next several hours passed in a blur. Dr. Grant helped him organize a proper documentation file, his father's service records, the original foundation application, school transcripts, witness statements from Arlington. Tasha Wynn recorded a detailed interview focusing on the medical facts of heat exhaustion and the precedent for civilian intervention in emergencies. By late afternoon, Malik stood on the courthouse steps, clutching a thick folder of papers. The heat pressed down like a heavy blanket, making his new dress shirt stick to his back. The building loomed above him, all stone and authority, making him feel small and powerless. Inside his folder, housing assistance appeals, scholarship documentation, proof of his father's foundation connection, letters of support from Dr. Grant and Major Torres. Everything organized, labeled, copied in triplicate. A group of tourists passed by, some pointing at the courthouse architecture. Malik remembered being just another invisible kid on these streets days ago. Now his face was on the news, his actions debated by strangers, his future tangled in red tape. He thought of his father's dog tags, now hanging safely at home. Marcus Carter had fought systems too: military bureaucracy, VA paperwork, the slow grind of trying to build something better for his family. He hadn't won every battle, but he'd never stopped pushing. The courthouse doors stood open, pumping out cold air into the sweltering day. Malik checked his watch. Still 30 minutes until his appointment with the housing authority clerk. His knees felt weak, his throat dry. But Ms. Darlene was right. Systems don't move unless somebody pushes. He gripped his folder tighter and climbed the first step. The hallway's overhead light buzzed and flickered, casting uncertain shadows across the worn carpet where Malik and Renee sat. 2 duffel bags rested against the wall, packed with essentials, just in case, as Renee had said with forced calm. Their apartment door stood ajar behind them, the evening heat seeping out into the marginally cooler corridor. Malik's laptop balanced on his knees, screen brightness turned low to save battery. Each refresh brought new daggers. Kid probably planned the whole thing. Show me the money trail. Disrespected sacred ground for attention. Renee leaned against his shoulder, pretending not to look at the screen. Her work uniform was wrinkled from a double shift, name tag slightly crooked. She'd rushed home when Malik texted about the ceremony postponement. "They're saying it was staged, Mom," Malik whispered, scrolling through another vicious comment thread. "Like I knew that guard would collapse. Like I planned everything. People who weren't there don't know anything," Renee said firmly, but her hands twisted anxiously in her lap. Malik's phone buzzed, a text from Dr. Grant. "News about Evan. Call when you can." He stepped away from Renee, moving toward the stairwell for privacy. Dr. Grant answered immediately. "I heard through foundation contacts," she said without preamble. "They're pressuring Evan to take early retirement. calling the fainting incident a sign of weakness incompatible with the honor guard position. The words hit Malik like physical blows. But he collapsed because of the heat. Anyone would have. Doesn't matter to them. Image is everything. A guard who faints, even once, even in extreme conditions. She paused. They're building a case that he showed poor judgment in coming to duty that day. Malik slid down the wall, concrete rough against his back. This is my fault. If I hadn't jumped in, maybe they would have handled it quietly. Maybe. Don't go down that road, Dr. Grant interrupted. You acted to save a life. That's never wrong. But after hanging up, the guilt settled heavy in Malik's chest. He'd wanted to help, to honor his father's legacy of service. Instead, he might have destroyed another soldier's career. When he returned to their hallway spot, a new email waited in his inbox. Subject line, Proposed Resolution, from a Foundation intermediary he'd never met. The message was carefully worded. A public statement from Malik, admitting he had acted rashly and without proper respect for protocol. The Foundation would distance itself officially, but ensure his funding continued through private channels. Evan's retirement would be classified as voluntary, preserving his honor. Everyone saved face. A clean solution, the email concluded. Renee read over his shoulder, her breath catching. Baby, maybe we should consider it. We need that scholarship. We need somewhere to live. Malik stared at the screen until the words blurred. The solution was simple, really. Say he was wrong. Say he acted without thinking. Let them protect their image. Get his future back. But he remembered the burning stone under his knees, the weight of Evan's head as he'd cushioned it from the sun, the absolute certainty in that moment that protocol meant nothing compared to a human life. I can't lie, Mom, he whispered. Malik. Her voice cracked. Sometimes survival means Dad never lied. Malik touched the dog tags through his shirt, even when it cost him. Remember when his supervisor wanted him to sign off on those rushed vehicle repairs? He refused because it might get soldiers killed. Lost his promotion chance. And we struggled for months after, Renee said softly. But he slept at night. Malik closed the laptop. He knew who he was. Standing slowly, muscles stiff from sitting on the floor, Malik walked to the van parked in the lot below. The Carter Mobile Lab lettering gleamed faintly in the security lights. Inside, he settled at the small desk station, opened his laptop again, and created a new document. His fingers hovered over the keys. What could he say that would matter against the weight of tradition and protocol? How could he defend his choice without seeming disrespectful? The van's interior still smelled of new upholstery and fresh paint. Somewhere in the darkness outside, crickets chirped, a familiar summer sound that reminded him of nights sitting with his dad on their old apartment's fire escape, talking about engines and honor and doing what's right. Malik touched the dog tags again. Dad, help me stand tall. He began to type. My name is Malik Carter. I am 14 years old. Last week, I broke protocol at Arlington National Cemetery by crossing a barrier to help a fallen tomb guard. I did this not out of disrespect, but because in that moment, saving a life mattered more than any rule. The words came slowly but surely, each one weighed and considered. No anger, no bitterness, just truth. Outside, Renee watched from their hallway perch, her face illuminated by her phone as she scrolled through more hateful comments. She'd lived through enough hard times to know how systems could grind down hope, how doing right didn't always mean winning. But in the van's soft interior light, her son's silhouette remained straight-backed and determined, fingers moving steadily across the keys, choosing integrity over rescue. The community center's fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the hastily arranged press room. Metal folding chairs creaked as reporters settled in, their cameras forming a wall of watchful lenses. The space normally hosted bingo nights and youth programs. Now it held Malik's future in its institutional beige walls. Malik stood behind a simple podium, his freshly pressed shirt feeling stiff against his neck. The dog tags beneath created a slight bump, a reminder of strength he desperately needed. His hands trembled as he arranged his handwritten notes, the paper carrying slight wrinkles from where he'd gripped it too tightly during the ride over. Renee stood just behind his right shoulder, her work uniform exchanged for her one good dress. She'd called in sick to be here, risking a warning from her supervisor. Her presence felt like a shield against the camera flashes and murmuring voices. In the front row, Dr. Grant sat ramrod straight, her silver hair pulled back severely, eyes sharp behind her glasses. Next to her, Ms. Darlene Knox had insisted on coming despite her bad knees, armed with a paper fan and fierce determination. They looked like sentries guarding Malik's right to speak. The room fell quiet as Malik cleared his throat. The microphone carried even that small sound, making him wince. But when he spoke, his voice came out clear and steady. "My name is Malik Carter. A week ago, I crossed a security barrier at Arlington National Cemetery to help a fallen tomb guard. I've been asked to apologize for breaking protocol, but I can't, because I would cross that rope again." A reporter's pen scratched loudly. Someone coughed. Malik pushed forward. Not for attention, not for rewards, but because in that moment, someone's life mattered more than my fear of consequences. I saw a person in trouble, and I acted. That's all. He gripped the podium edges, knuckles whitening slightly. I understand the sacred nature of Arlington. My father, Marcus Carter, served in the Army. His dog tags are around my neck right now. He taught me about honor before he died. Real honor, not just rules. He said true respect means protecting people, not just traditions. Malik described those crucial moments in detail, the rising heat index, the subtle signs of distress he'd noticed, the way Evan had started to sway before collapsing. He explained basic heat illness symptoms with terms Dr. Grant had helped him research, showing this wasn't reckless impulse but informed concern. I removed my shoes before kneeling because the stone was burning hot. That wasn't disrespect. It was acknowledging how dangerous the conditions were. I used my shirt as shade and my last soda to cool his neck, because those were the only resources I had. I called for medics clearly, and stayed still to avoid causing further harm. His voice grew stronger as he continued, "I've seen comments saying I staged this for money or fame. But think about it. How could anyone plan for a guard to collapse? How could a 14-year-old kid orchestrate something involving the Marines and a Veterans Foundation? The truth is simpler. I saw someone in trouble, and I helped. That's all." Tasha Wynn raised her hand, her expression thoughtful. "Malik, aren't you afraid? Your scholarship is frozen. Your housing situation is uncertain. You could lose everything. Do you regret acting?" The question hung in the air. Malik felt Renee's hand brush his shoulder, supporting, not directing. "I'm terrified," he admitted quietly, "but I'm more scared of becoming someone who only helps when it's convenient. Someone who walks past suffering because it might cost too much to stop. My dad never turned away from people in need. Neither will I." He straightened his shoulders, channeling his father's military bearing. "I respect Staff Sergeant Price's service deeply. I respect the Marines and the Foundation. I won't blame anyone for following their protocols or protecting their institutions, but I also won't pretend I was wrong to help another human being in crisis. Sometimes being honorable means accepting consequences for doing what's right." The room had grown very still. Even the camera shutters seemed quieter. "My mom works 2 jobs," Malik continued. "We struggle with bills. That scholarship meant everything to us. But if helping someone means losing it," he touched the dog tags through his shirt, "then I'll find another way forward. Because that's what Carter men do. We stand tall, even when it costs us." The questions afterward came rapid fire. Malik answered each one directly, without defensiveness or blame. When asked about his future plans, he spoke about his work with Dr. Grant on the heat monitor project, still believing in possibility even under pressure. The press conference ran longer than planned, sunlight shifting across the linoleum floor as morning became afternoon. Finally, the center's coordinator signaled time was up. Malik stepped away from the podium on shaky legs, emotionally drained but somehow lighter. Ms. Darlene reached him first, paper fan working overtime as she pulled him into a fierce hug. Dr. Grant squeezed his shoulder with engineer's precision, firm enough to support, gentle enough not to overwhelm. Renee simply held his hand as they walked toward the exit, her grip telling him everything words couldn't. The community center's double doors opened onto bright sunshine. Malik blinked, adjusting to the glare, and saw them. A line of Marines in uniform standing quietly near the parking lot. Not approaching, not threatening, just listening. Some wore memorial pins that matched his father's unit. Others held phones that had likely streamed his statement. All stood with parade ground stillness, faces unreadable but attentive. The text message lit up Malik's phone screen as he sat with Renee on a bench outside the community center. His heart jumped at the name. Evan Price. Meet me at Arlington's visitor area. Evan Price. Malik showed the message to his mother, who pressed her lips together in concern. The sun blazed overhead, promising another scorching afternoon. We'll need to be careful, Renee said, already planning. Take breaks. Stay hydrated. Her protective instincts were in full force after the morning's emotional press conference. They couldn't afford a taxi, so they made their way to the nearest bus stop, joining others seeking shelter in the thin slice of shade cast by the shelter. Malik carried a refilled water bottle, remembering hard lessons about heat from the day everything started. The bus ride was stop and start through D.C. traffic, the air conditioning struggling against the summer heat. Renee dozed briefly, exhausted from standing through the press conference. Malik watched the city scroll past, wondering what Evan wanted to say that couldn't be shared over the phone. They changed buses once, waiting 20 minutes at a transfer point. Malik shared their water with an elderly woman who looked overheated, earning a grateful smile that reminded him of Ms. Darlene. His mom squeezed his hand, proud of his continuing kindness, even under stress. The final bus dropped them near Arlington's entrance. They walked slowly up the sloping path to the visitor center, taking breaks in shaded spots. Other tourists passed them, many carrying umbrellas against the sun. Security personnel nodded at them. Malik's face was recognizable now. Near the visitor center's cool interior, Evan Price stood in his formal uniform, ramrod straight but with subtle signs of strain around his eyes. He looked different from the day he'd collapsed, more controlled, but also more burdened. "Thank you for coming," Evan said formally, then softened slightly. "Both of you. Mrs. Carter, I apologize for pulling your son into this situation." Renee shook her head. "You didn't pull him anywhere. Malik makes his own choices about helping people." They found a quiet corner with chairs. Evan's posture remained military precise, but his voice dropped low. "They're asking me to step down," he said, without preamble. "Not officially. That would raise questions. Just quietly transferred to a different post. They're calling it a health-based reassignment." Malik's stomach clenched. This was exactly what he'd feared. His help causing more harm than good. But Evan wasn't finished. "There's something you need to know. Something no one knows except my direct superior." He glanced around, then continued. "That morning, before my shift, I was at Walter Reed Medical Center. A fellow service member's daughter, she's 6, needed blood for her leukemia treatment. I'm a match." Understanding dawned on Malik's face. "That's why you were dehydrated." Evan nodded. "The donation guidelines say to wait 24 hours before strenuous activity, but they were short-staffed, and I didn't want to leave my post uncovered. I thought I could push through." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Turns out I'm not invincible." "You were trying to help someone," Malik said softly. "Just like my dad would have done." Exactly. I didn't collapse from weakness. I collapsed from choosing to serve in more ways than one. Just like you chose to help me despite the consequences. Evan leaned forward. That's why I asked you here. I want to speak publicly about what really happened, but I need your permission. My permission? Malik blinked in surprise. Going public means exposing private medical details. It means challenging leadership's narrative. It could affect your situation with the foundation. Evan's expression was serious. I won't do it without your agreement. Before Malik could respond, footsteps approached. Major Sofia Torres appeared, her face showing the strain of divided loyalties. I thought I might find you both here, she said quietly. She took in their serious expressions. I assume Staff Sergeant Price has explained the situation? Evan stood at attention. Yes, ma'am. Torres gestured for him to sit. At ease, Sergeant. This conversation needs to happen as people, not ranks. She turned to Malik and Renee. The system is designed to protect traditions and protocols. Sometimes that means it struggles to recognize when humanity should take precedence. What's the right thing to do? Malik asked, genuine in his uncertainty. Torres's expression softened. Sometimes the right thing is letting the truth speak, even when it's uncomfortable. If you both choose to share your story, the real story, I'll make sure you're heard fairly. Malik looked at his mother, who nodded slightly. Then he turned to Evan. You risked yourself to help a sick child. I crossed a line to help you. Maybe people need to know that rules and honor aren't always the same thing. It won't be easy, Torres warned. There will be resistance. Nothing worth doing ever is, Renee said quietly, echoing one of Marcus's favorite sayings. The late afternoon sun slanted through Arlington's trees as they walked toward the memorial grounds where news crews were already gathering. Evan and Malik moved side by side, the tomb guard and the boy who helped him, about to share a story of sacrifice that went deeper than protocol. Torres walked slightly behind them, her presence both protection and witness. Renee followed, watching her son stand tall like his father taught him, preparing to face another moment of truth. The sun dipped behind Arlington's trees as camera crews set up their equipment in the designated media area. Tasha Wynn directed her team with quiet efficiency, positioning lights to combat the growing shadows. The late evening brought blessed relief from the day's heat, though humidity still clung to everyone's skin. Malik stood slightly apart from the gathering crowd, watching technicians adjust microphones and check audio levels. His mother's hand rested on his shoulder, steady and warm. The past hour's conversation with Evan still echoed in his mind. The truth about the blood donation, the sick child, the choice between duty and compassion. Major Torres spoke quietly with Arlington's public affairs officer, smoothing the way for this unplanned press event. A few curious tourists lingered at the edges, phones raised to capture whatever was about to unfold. Dr. Grant had arrived after hearing about the gathering, positioning herself protectively near Malik and Renee. 2 minutes, Tasha called out, adjusting her blazer despite the warmth. Her face showed the focused energy of someone who knew a crucial story was about to break. Evan Price stepped forward in his formal uniform, every crease perfect, every button gleaming. But there was something different in his bearing now. Not just military precision, but a deeper kind of strength. He looked directly into the primary camera as Tasha raised her hand to signal the start of recording. My name is Staff Sergeant Evan Price, he began, his voice clear and steady. I serve as a sentinel at the tomb of the unknown soldier. 3 days ago, I collapsed during my watch duty. What followed has led to controversy surrounding the actions of Malik Carter, who broke protocol to help me. He paused, squared his shoulders, and continued. Tonight, I'm here to share the full truth of what happened that morning. At Oro 600 hours, I was at Walter Reed Medical Center. A fellow service member's 6-year-old daughter needed a specific blood type for her ongoing leukemia treatment. I'm a match. I chose to donate, knowing the medical guidelines recommend 24 hours of rest afterward. Murmurs rippled through the gathered crowd. Malik noticed several phones lowering as people leaned in to listen more closely. I made the decision to report for my scheduled watch despite this. We were short-staffed, and I believed I could manage. A hint of emotion crept into Evan's controlled tone. I was wrong. The combination of blood donation, extreme heat, and the physical demands of the watch led to my collapse. And that's when Malik Carter acted. Evan turned slightly, acknowledging Malik's presence. This young man didn't just break protocol, he upheld the highest calling of service, protecting life at any cost. His hands kept my head from hitting stone. His quick thinking helped prevent heat stroke. While others debated procedure, Malik simply acted. The lights caught the shine of Evan's service medals as he drew himself up to his full height. Some have claimed his actions dishonored the tomb and its traditions. I stand here tonight to state unequivocally, Malik Carter didn't dishonor the tomb. He honored life. He demonstrated the very values we stand watch to protect: courage, sacrifice, and unwavering dedication to others. Tasha stepped forward with a microphone. Staff Sergeant Price, are you concerned about how this admission might affect your position? My concern, Evan replied firmly, is for truth and justice. A young man's future shouldn't be threatened because he chose to help someone in need. And a 6-year-old girl shouldn't lack for blood donors because we're afraid to admit that even soldiers need help sometimes. The statement hit home. Malik saw several veterans in the crowd nodding, their faces showing clear support. A Marine in dress blues near the back stood straighter, pride evident in his bearing. Before Tasha could ask another question, a new figure approached the microphones. Gideon Price, Evan's father and the foundation director, stepped into the light. His presence commanded immediate attention. The Price Veterans Foundation exists to honor service and sacrifice, he stated. Today, we're announcing that Malik Carter's scholarship will not only be fully restored, but permanently guaranteed. He paused, letting the words settle. Furthermore, we will be conducting a complete audit of our application processes to identify and remove barriers that keep deserving families from accessing our support. Ms. Whitaker appeared at the edge of the gathering, tablet in hand, catching Renee's eye. She moved quickly to Malik's mother, speaking in low tones. Malik watched his mother's face transform from worry to cautious joy. It's confirmed, Renee whispered to Malik. Everything's restored. The van registration is being expedited, and they're sending a legal team for the housing case. Malik felt something tight in his chest finally begin to loosen. But experience had taught him to be cautious. Good things could vanish as quickly as they appeared. He watched Tasha's crew moving among the crowd, gathering additional comments from veterans and officials. The night air grew cooler as the last interviews wrapped up. Malik's phone buzzed with messages from Ms. Darlene and Jalen, watching the live coverage from home. Major Torres approached to coordinate tomorrow's meetings, her clipboard filled with action items and signatures needed. The drive home was quiet, each of them processing the evening's events. When they reached their apartment building, they found a surprise waiting. Dozens of water bottles stacked neatly by their door, left by neighbors who had watched the broadcast. A note attached read simply, "Our community stands tall together." Malik helped his mother carry the water inside, feeling the weight of support in each bottle. Through their window, he could see more neighbors gathering in the courtyard, their pride in their community's hero rising like a quiet tide. The fluorescent lights of the courthouse hallway cast harsh shadows as Malik sat beside his mother on a wooden bench, both dressed in their best clothes. 2 mornings had passed since Evan's public statement, but the anxiety of this moment felt just as intense as any press conference. Mrs. Elena Rodriguez, the foundation's attorney, reviewed documents from her leather briefcase, her reading glasses perched on her nose. "Remember," she said quietly, "let me do the talking. We have everything documented." Malik nodded, watching other families shuffle past with their own worries etched on their faces. The marble floors amplified every footstep, every whispered conversation. Renee gripped her son's hand, her other hand clutching a manila folder containing 2 years' worth of rent receipts. "Carter versus Metropolitan Housing Authority," called the clerk from the doorway. They filed into the hearing room, which felt smaller than Malik had imagined. The Housing Authority representative sat at one table, surrounded by stacks of papers. Ms. Rodriguez guided Malik and Renee to the opposite table, her movements precise and confident. The hearing officer, a woman with steel-gray hair and reading glasses on a chain, studied the file before her. "I understand there's new documentation regarding Form 23B?" "Yes, Your Honor." Ms. Rodriguez stood. "I have here proof that the form in question was actually submitted 3 times by Ms. Carter. The office's own date stamps show it was misplaced in their system, not missing due to tenant negligence." She approached the bench with copies, each highlight marked in neon yellow. The Housing Authority representative leaned forward, frowning at his own records. "Furthermore, Ms. Rodriguez continued, I've filed the corrected paperwork this morning, along with verification of the rent assistance program now in place." She produced another set of documents. "The Price Veterans Foundation guarantees 6 months of payments, with an option to extend based on need." The hearing officer studied the papers carefully, while Malik held his breath. Renee's hand trembled in his. "These appear to be in order," the officer finally said. "Given the evidence of administrative error and the guaranteed payment program, I'm halting the eviction process." She stamped several papers with firm authority. "Case dismissed." Renee's knees buckled slightly. Malik steadied her as tears welled in her eyes. Ms. Rodriguez gathered their documents with a small, satisfied smile. Outside the courthouse, the summer air felt lighter somehow. Renee hugged Ms. Rodriguez, whispering thank yous. The attorney simply patted her shoulder. "Get some rest," she advised. "The hard part's over." By early afternoon, Malik stood in the mobile lab with Dr. Grant, carefully soldering the final connection on their heat monitor prototype. The van's interior felt like a real workshop now, with tools organized on magnetic strips and a small fan circulating air through the open doors. "Careful with that joint," Dr. Grant advised, her eyes sharp behind safety glasses. "We want this to last." The device was elegantly simple, a compact unit that could monitor body temperature and hydration levels, with clear warning indicators. They'd designed it to be sturdy enough for ceremonial gear, but unobtrusive enough to maintain dignity. "Try the test sequence," Dr. Grant suggested. Malik pressed the activation button. Green lights blinked in sequence, then settled into a steady monitoring pattern. The display showed clear readings that anyone could understand at a glance. "It works," he breathed, hardly daring to believe it. "Of course it works," Dr. Grant smiled. "You built it right." A shadow fell across the van's entrance. Major Torres stood there in her formal uniform, clipboard in hand as always. But today, her usual serious expression held a hint of satisfaction. "Good news," she announced, stepping into the van. "The Sentinel Review Board met this morning. Staff Sergeant Price will retain his position. Moreover, he's been appointed to lead a new safety protocols committee for ceremonial units." She glanced at the prototype in Malik's hands. "I understand they'll be very interested in testing that device." Before Malik could respond, another figure appeared at the van's entrance, Gideon Price himself, looking surprisingly informal in shirt sleeves despite the heat. "Is this a good time?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. He climbed into the van, examining the workshop setup with approval. "The Foundation Board met early this morning. We've made some decisions I wanted to share in person." He pulled out a chair from the small workspace, settling in with deliberate care. "The Marcus Carter Scholarship will become an annual award," he announced. "Full funding for 5 students each year from underserved communities who demonstrate the kind of character your father embodied. And that you've shown us, Malik." Malik stared at him, the prototype forgotten in his hands. His father's name would live on, not in grief, but in opportunity for others. The thought made his chest tight. "The first class will be selected this fall," Gideon continued. "We'd like you to serve on the Student Advisory Committee, if you're willing." That evening, Malik stood in front of his bedroom mirror, adjusting his suit jacket with steady hands. Tomorrow's rescheduled ceremony felt different now. Not a weight of expectations, but a celebration of promises kept and new beginnings. The jacket fit perfectly, no longer feeling like borrowed dignity. In the reflection, he saw his father's eyes looking back at him. He touched the dog tags beneath his shirt, their familiar weight a reminder of how far they'd come. From the kitchen, he could hear his mother humming as she prepared dinner. A sound he hadn't heard in years. The air conditioning hummed quietly, keeping the apartment comfortable despite the summer heat outside. The morning air felt different at Arlington, cooler, gentler, as if nature itself had decided to be kind. American flags rippled in a soft breeze against a pearl-gray sky. The metal folding chairs arranged before the podium gradually filled with guests, while service members stood at attention nearby, their uniforms crisp and precise. Malik adjusted his tie for the 100th time, standing slightly apart from the small group gathered behind the stage. His mother, Renee, wore a simple blue dress they'd found at a second-hand store, but she carried herself like royalty. Dr. Grant had traded her usual work clothes for a tailored pantsuit, her silver hair neatly styled. Major Torres stood ramrod straight in her dress uniform, while Evan Price and his father Gideon conversed quietly nearby. 2 minutes, a coordinator whispered, checking her clipboard. Malik slipped his hand into his pocket, touching the familiar ridges of his father's dog tags. He'd polished them last night until they gleamed. The other pocket held his carefully folded speech, though he'd memorized every word. "You ready?" Renee asked softly, smoothing an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve. "Yes, ma'am," Malik replied, the formal response making her smile. The ceremony began with military precision. Presentation of colors, national anthem, invocation. Malik watched it all through a slight haze of unreality, as if he were simultaneously present and floating above the scene. When Gideon Price approached the podium to introduce him, Malik took a deep breath and straightened his shoulders. "Ladies and gentlemen," Gideon's voice carried clearly across the gathering, "please welcome Malik Carter." The walk to the podium felt endless and instant at once. Malik gripped the wooden edges, looking out at the sea of faces. He spotted Ms. Darlene and Jalen in the third row, next to some of his neighbors. Tasha Wynn sat with her camera crew near the front, but for once, her presence didn't make him nervous. "My father, Marcus Carter," Malik began, his voice steady, "was a man who fixed things others had given up on. He could coax life back into engines that seemed dead. He could spot the one loose wire in a maze of circuits. But more than machines, he fixed hope." Malik described watching his father work late into the night, helping neighbors with broken-down cars so they could make it to work the next day. He spoke about Marcus teaching him to use tools properly, to respect both the danger and potential in every piece of equipment. "He never saw broken things as garbage," Malik continued. "He saw them as opportunities waiting for someone to care enough to try." His eyes found his mother's face. "And when he passed, my mom carried that weight. She worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, but she never dropped the most important thing: love. She taught me that true strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up and helping others rise, too." Renee pressed her hand to her mouth, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Doctor." Grant squeezed her shoulder gently. "I've learned that rules matter," Malik acknowledged, glancing at the tomb of the unknown soldier in the distance. "They protect what's sacred, but I've also learned that humanity matters first. Sometimes the highest honor we can show is to risk ourselves for others, even when it's uncomfortable or scary or might cost us something precious." He spoke about the scholarship program, about the Mobile Lab's mission to bring STEM education to underserved neighborhoods. His voice grew stronger as he described his vision for teaching other kids to build and repair, to transform discarded things into tools of progress. "My father couldn't finish his application to this foundation," Malik said, "but his spirit finished the work through all of us standing here today. through every person who chose to see possibility instead of protocol, hope instead of barriers. The ceremony shifted to the official dedication of the mobile lab. Marines in dress blues unveiled the van's new exterior graphics. Clean white paint with Carter Mobile STEM Lab in bold letters, the Foundation's logo beneath. Major Torres presented Malik with a commemorative Marine Corps coin, its weight solid and significant in his palm. After the formal closing, Malik approached Evan Price, who stood straight and strong despite the day's growing heat. From his pocket, Malik withdrew a small case containing the finished heat monitor prototype, its casing polished to a soft gleam. "The first one," Malik said simply, holding it out. "So what happened to you doesn't happen to anyone else." Evan accepted the device with careful hands, understanding its significance. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything." As the crowd began to disperse, Malik noticed a small boy standing near the rope line, staring at the tomb guards with undisguised wonder. The child's clothes were worn but clean, and his expression mirrored what Malik had felt that first day, awe mixed with longing. A display of souvenir booklets sat on a nearby table, but the boy only looked at them wistfully. Malik approached the table, paid for a booklet, and walked over to the child. Kneeling down to meet the boy's eyes, he held out the glossy publication. "Here," he said gently. "This is for you." The boy's eyes widened. "Really? Really?" Malik smiled. "Stand tall, okay?" Later that afternoon, Malik parked the mobile lab outside a neighborhood elementary school. The sun had softened to amber, casting long shadows across the playground, where a group of children waited with barely contained excitement. Dr. Grant stood ready at the interior workbench, safety goggles and instruction sheets prepared. Malik took a deep breath, savoring the moment. Then he walked to the back of the van and opened the doors wide, revealing the organized tools and learning stations within. The children's faces lit up with possibility, just as his once had. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.